camera slowly zooms in on a rural hospital in Tapachula, Chiapas, Mexico, with soft, eerie music playing in the background. The camera cuts to an elderly woman being wheeled into the emergency room. In the quiet rural corners of Tapachula, a chilling health alert is spreading like wildfire. In mid-April 2025, a 77-year-old woman arrived at Ciudad Salud Hospital, her condition quickly spiraling into something the medical staff had never seen before. What started as a simple festering wound on her leg turned out to be something far more sinister. As the doctors began to examine her, they realized that what they were dealing with was not just a simple infection. Inside her wound, something moved. What they found was not just tissue necrosis. It was alive, flesh-eating larvae. This woman, and 5 others in the area, had been infected with a terrifying parasite known as Myiasis. This condition is caused by larvae from parasitic flies that feed on living or dead tissue, leaving horrific wounds in their wake. This video will take you through the disturbing truth of this outbreak, the terrifying science behind Myiasis, and how this deadly infection was first discovered. Stay tuned as we uncover what happened in Mexico and what you need to know to protect yourself. The first alarming case. The first case occurred on April 12, 2025, when the elderly woman, let's call her Maria, walked into the emergency room. What seemed like a typical wound turned into a nightmare. Initially, the doctors suspected a common bacterial infection, treating her with antibiotics and topical antiseptics. But the infection didn't respond. Instead, it began to grow, rapidly consuming the tissue. When the doctors attempted to clean the wound, they noticed something unexpected: small white larvae squirming beneath the surface. They were alive, and they were feeding on her flesh. A few hours later, Maria was diagnosed with Myiasis, a rare but potentially deadly condition. The doctors immediately took action, performing surgery to remove the maggots and treat the wound. This was the first case, but soon, others followed. What are flesh-eating larvae? Myiasis is caused by the larvae of certain species of flies, particularly the Cochleomia hominivorax, commonly known as the New World screwworm. These larvae are parasitic and invade the body through open wounds, sores, or mucous membranes, feeding on the host's living or dead tissue. Text on screen. Flesh-eating larvae. A parasite's feast on living tissue. Unlike typical maggots that feed on decaying matter, these parasites prefer living tissue, causing severe pain, infection, and potentially permanent tissue damage. Once inside the wound, the larvae grow quickly, feeding on the flesh and causing necrosis. The life cycle of the New World screwworm is fascinating but horrifying. After mating, adult females lay their eggs on exposed skin or open wounds. The eggs hatch within 8 to 12 hours, and the larvae begin to burrow into the host's flesh. Over the next few days, they continue to feed, growing rapidly before eventually leaving the host to pupate and transform into adult flies. The Mexico outbreak. Timeline of the 6 cases. As the first case emerged, local authorities were alerted, but what they didn't know was that the outbreak was just beginning. Within weeks, 5 more cases were confirmed. Each person had a different story, but they all had one terrifying thing in common: a parasitic infection of flesh-eating larvae. Let's break down the timeline of these 6 alarming cases. Case 1, April 12, 2025. Maria, a 77-year-old woman, presents with a severe leg wound. Upon examination, the presence of living larvae inside her wound is confirmed. She undergoes emergency surgery. Case 2, April 15, 25. A 9-year-old boy is brought to the hospital with a similar infection in his arm. The family reports that he had been playing outside near an abandoned unsanitary field, possibly attracting flies. Case 3, May 2, 2025. A migrant worker in his 30s, from the nearby countryside, reports a painful swollen foot. The larvae are found within the wound, and doctors act quickly to remove them. Case 4, May 5, 2025. A pregnant woman in her third trimester arrives at the hospital with an infection in her abdomen. Her case is particularly concerning as the larvae have reached her umbilical area, potentially putting her baby at risk. Case 5, May 9, 2025. A 3-year-old child is brought in with a massive infection on her leg. The family believes the child may have been bitten by an infected fly while playing in a rural area. Case 6, May 13, 2025. A 25-year-old construction worker suffers a severe infection in his leg after working outdoors in a poorly sanitized area. The larvae are discovered during his hospital visit. Medical response and public health measures. The discovery of multiple cases of Myiasis in such a short period raised alarms within the Mexican Ministry of Health. A public health emergency was declared in the region. Hospitals were quickly overwhelmed as the medical teams worked tirelessly to treat the growing number of cases. To manage the outbreak, the government implemented several emergency measures. Isolation of affected areas. Neighborhoods with high cases of infection were quarantined. Mass treatment of the population. Ivermectin and antibiotics were distributed to prevent further infection. Public education campaigns. Local communities were informed about the risks and how to prevent getting infected by covering wounds and avoiding exposure to flies. At the same time, health authorities worked with the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, to monitor the situation closely. Life cycle of the parasite and how it infects humans. The life cycle of the flesh-eating larvae begins when the adult fly lays its eggs in an open wound or exposed skin. Within hours, the eggs hatch and tiny larvae begin to burrow deep into the tissue. Over the next several days, the larvae feed on the flesh, growing larger and causing increasing damage to the host's body. The larvae exit the wound when they're ready to pupate and transform into adult flies, starting the cycle again. In the case of the outbreak in Mexico, the warm climate, poor sanitation, and high number of people working outdoors all created the perfect environment for these flies to thrive. Symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment. The symptoms of Myiasis are not always immediately obvious. At first, it might seem like a simple wound or infection, but as the larvae grow, the wound becomes increasingly painful and swollen. Eventually, the larvae may be visible, moving beneath the skin. Diagnosing Myiasis requires careful examination, often involving the removal of tissue for testing and imaging. Once confirmed, the primary treatment is the removal of the larvae, which can be done surgically or manually, depending on the severity. Antibiotics and antiparasitic drugs like ivermectin are also prescribed to combat the infection and prevent further complications. While the outbreak in Mexico was alarming, the recovery of those affected proves that early detection and prompt treatment can make all the difference. With the support of medical professionals and public health efforts, the situation has started to stabilize. As we've learned from this outbreak, Myiasis is a rare but real threat. It reminds us of the importance of good hygiene, proper wound care, and the need for vigilance in the face of emerging health risks. Stay informed. Stay safe.